Good morning. Our lesson this morning is taken out of the book of Galatians, chapter 1, chapter 2. The One True Gospel. That's a good title. Key verse is taken out of Galatians 1, verse 9. As we said before, so say I. Now again, if any man preach any other gospel than that you have received, let him be accursed. Pretty strong language. Paul wrote the book of Galatians to correct a problem. He had gone to several cities in Galatia and had laid the foundation of several churches there. And it seems that sometime after that, Jews from Jerusalem, although we're not really told they're from Jerusalem, and he calls them Judaizers. But it seems that in the churches that he founded, that the Jews would come in after him and try to add something to the gospel. They wanted the Gentiles to take on some of the rights that were given in the law of Moses, and that especially was the rite of circumcision. So Paul is writing this letter of correction, and we see that in verse 9 that he uses the word there, accursed. Well, that's pretty strong language. That word that is translated from the word in the Greek is anathema. And anathema, from what I've read, the closest meaning for that would mean the opposite of something that's holy. So, I mean, that was very strong language. And also, if we read, when we first read the greeting, I don't know, it seems to me that this is a pretty cold greeting as compared to his usual epistles. So, but in this, Paul did really three things. He told them the correction. He gave them the correction. He gave his authority, where he told the Galatian church that his authority did not come from man. He was not taught by man, but his authority as an apostle came from God. And we know that in Acts chapter 9, we read about his conversion, that he was blinded on the road to Damascus, and that he was led to Damascus and met a man there named Ananias, and Ananias gave him the gospel. He accepted it and was converted. After that, it says that he didn't go to Jerusalem. He went to the desert of Arabia, and there is where he tells them that he received a revelation from God. God gave him revelation of the gospel at that time. Later, he went to Jerusalem and met with John and James and Peter. And I guess he told them what he was teaching, and they were in agreement with what he was teaching, and they were happy to find that he was fulfilling the commission and he had gone to the Gentiles. He also told them during that time that they had told him that his message was good, only not to forget the poor people. And he said that, of course, that was part of his mission and that he was happy to do it. Later, he went back to Jerusalem and he took Barnabas and Titus with him. They went to the evening meal of the church, what is translated as the love feast. Well, Peter had been eating and fellowshipping with the Gentiles. But James had sent men from Jerusalem, and they were in Antioch at this time. And James had sent men to Antioch, and when Peter saw those men, he kind of gave the Gentiles the cold shoulder, is what I would call it. And when Paul saw this, he rebuked Peter for it, and he said, you can't have it both ways. I'm sure that Peter had told him of his vision of the sheep coming down and God telling him to kill and eat the animals. And so because he knew that the gospel was not only for the Jews, but for all people, the Gentiles included. So, in conclusion, they have some questions here, and I thought, these would be good for ourselves to think about. And it says, Paul directly confronted the dangerous heresy threatening the Galatian church. What steps should a church take to deal with members who fall into error of doctrine and begin pressuring others to believe likewise? Well, I think the answer to that we read in the 1st and 2nd Corinthians deals with those things. And so we know that I believe the bottom line teaching of this, especially these first 2 chapters, is we're saved by faith, and you can't add anything to it. It's strictly any kind of work that you add to that distorts the message. A lot of people, especially men are work oriented. You give us a project, give us a set of rules. We can follow those rules and we can accomplish that project. But the gospel is not like that. The gospel teaches us that we only need faith. We need to believe that Jesus died for our sins. And if we believe that, we will be saved. Now, we know that there are things that we can call works, but those things are not works for salvation. Those works come as a fruit of being saved, of the fruit of having a love for others, especially those in the church, but also for those on the outside, because after all, that is the Great Commission, to go into all the world and preach the gospel. So if those works that we do come out of our faith, then I think we're doing the right thing in that. So I know this was short, but the point of it is pretty, I guess you'd say, pointed itself. So we won't continue. I'll just say, God bless you and keep you, and hope to see you soon.